Hi, I'm Odessa Blaine, Executive Producer of the FW Leadership Series podcast. This season, we're doing something a little different, putting your leadership questions to Helen at the end of each episode. It's a chance to ask Helen what's on your mind, your workplace dilemmas, conundrums, or pet hates. We love voice notes, or you can send us your written questions at hello@futurewomen.com. We'll put the link in the show notes. Enjoy the show.
Hi, I'm Helen McCabe, Managing Director and founder of FW. I began life as a journalist, held senior roles in newspapers, edited Australia's largest magazine, and in 2018, I launched my own business. FW is dedicated to helping women navigate their working lives. But I've made my share of mistakes, especially as a leader. In this series, I go in search of answers to often complex leadership challenges. I explore the latest thinking on how to be a great leader and return to the tried and true methods to better understand what works and in what situations. My guest this week is Nicole Scurrah. Nicole is a friend and an accomplished leader. She was Chief of Staff to Queensland Premier Anna Bligh, Telstra Health's Chief Operating Officer, and most recently a partner at Sayers Group. She's well known in the industry for taking a team from Sayers Group to set up a rival entity. Today, Nicole is founder and executive chair of Create Advisory. In this episode, she talks about how to be a great leader when people are your least favourite part of the job. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Tell me, when is the very first time that you led a team?
But it's a hard one because I think you start leading teams before you actually think about it. So
Exactly.
I think maybe back when I was a loan officer in Westpac Bank in Victoria, and I had to work with all of the tellers back in the days when branch managers and loan officers made decisions, and I worked with the tellers. And they were amazing. They knew all the clients and customers. And I actually think that was the first time, but without realising it.
I think that's right. I think you do it sort of creeps up on you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And then suddenly you find yourself in strife.
Yeah.
You sort of look around and go, oh my goodness, I'm actually in charge here. And I didn't quite get any training or think about it. Tell me, who were your leadership teachers? Who do you think has been influential on your leadership style?
I definitely think, going back to that time, Anne Sherry was the CEO of Westpac, and they'd worked out that getting women back into the branches was fundamental. And so they started doing things like maternity leave, and they built themselves a childcare centre. And I thought that was amazing. And I'm fortunate that I still know Anne, even though at that time I knew who she was, but had no idea who she was, if you get what I mean. But I have to single out Anna Bligh, who I had the great fortune of working for many years. And man, she is an amazing human being, both as a leader and as a human.
Yeah, you've just named two really excellent people. I would probably talk about both of them too if I was being asked those questions. Anne Sherry just didn't know me from Adam, but if I ever asked to see her, would make time. And then I would say, I'm building this business. What do you think? And she would go, yes, no, or whatever. And had just been such a supporter and always turned up for anything I've asked her to. And I could talk about Anna Bligh for some time, but I first really met her when she walked into my office and told me she'd been diagnosed with cancer.
Yeah.
And I was working on a national magazine at the time called Women's Weekly, and she agreed to be photographed as she fought cancer. Actually, I think I first met her when she was running the floods. Were you working for her then by chance?
Yes.
That was an incredible period of leadership.
Amazing human who just actually know how to connect with people, had no ego, high levels of intelligence, and not dissimilar to Anne, but seems to have an ability to help whoever asks.
So how do you get to be a politician, Nicole, and Premier, and not have an ego?
It's actually interesting. I think that some people get into politics for the power and other people get into politics for the passion. And I'd say this agnostic of what politics they believe in. I think they do it because they feel this overwhelming desire, just like in business, to actually do something different or make a difference. When you look at entrepreneurs, really they start business because they feel like they've got an idea and that idea might make a difference. I think a lot of the politicians that get into politics with conviction, no matter what that is, get into it not to stroke their ego, but they think that if they're in it, they can do the thing that will make a difference.
I still think it's rare to find people in politics that don't have egos. I think it's rare to find people in leadership positions that don't have egos. And I suspect you're not someone with a big ego either. What would you say is your superpower, your leadership superpower? What are you really good at?
Not much.
That is not true.
I think I'm stubborn. I think my superpower is stubbornness. So once I make my mind up that I'm going to do something, I sort of can't be deterred. And I think that if you're going to do something, actually having the stubbornnness to see it through, it can sometimes be a blessing and a curse. So I'm not sure I put that down as a superpower, because there's plenty of superpowers I'd like to have. But look, I think once I turn my mind to something, I pretty much go and do it, even no matter what the consequences are.
So how do you hire and who do you hire, and what are you looking for when you are putting your actual team together?
I think even if you assess yourself critically, I think what you realise is that what you've got to have is a bunch of people around you that aren't you. And so for hiring, definitely try and find people that don't have the same skill set, but definitely have the same, if I can call it, ambition or desire. And it's not good or bad, but we try and pride ourselves on doing high quality work. So different skill set, but I definitely try and find the same sort of cultural fit would be, know how to have fun, but know how to work hard, know how to be dedicated to quality, but know how to bring a different perspectives. So I think you need to complement yourself. We recently did something, a team building exercise around assessing our skill set, and no surprises to me, but I scored second last on categorizations of empathy and woo. Woo is like being able to charm people. But I was very glad to see that there were some people in my team that scored number one on woo. And so, I actually think that goes to get the same culture but get very different skills. And that's what I look for.
So asking for a friend, how do you interview for work ethic?
That's the hardest thing. But I think if people tell you the types of things that they've done in the past and how they, your classic questions, what do you like doing? If they start with, I'll always take a shortcut. Mind you, that's how they hire technology developers, is they want people that are as lazy as possible. I learned this when I was at Telstra Health, because they'll work out the shortest way to write code. And I was like, wow, that is so different to what you get taught along the way to, you don't want anyone to find shortcuts. But I just think if you talk to people, as a general rule, I think your gut tells you whether or not people have a good work ethic. Like the passion in which people talk about their work often describes a lot.
All right, well, let's talk about you've got your team, and I'll just repeat for our listeners that you now run a very successful consulting business that you sort of put together, not really mindfully, right? It sort of accidentally happened. Is that fair to say? Or would you say, yes, I had a...
No, absolutely.
Yeah. And 12 or so people followed you. So you're obviously a leader. If people wake up and go, I'm just going to go and work with Nicole because that seems like it'll be fun. Like, it's a lot. It's a big endorsement of who you are and what you do. And the business is going really well. And now you are in that classic phase of being an entrepreneur with all of the challenges of being an entrepreneur. So Talk to me a little bit about how you navigate the day-to-day challenges of running a business, particularly as, the world is as uncertain as it is right now.
Yeah. So when we left, when we decided to leave based on a value-based decision, there were things that we'd seen that I guess we were mostly driven, and this might be perceived as not the right way to be driven, but from how we didn't want to run the business. And so that came to I guess drove everything from how we appoint the board to how the team really valued working really hard but getting longer leave, all of those things. I find that the single thing I find hardest is the people thing, just because people are people. And that's definitely, I would say, both a personal area of weakness plus the thing I find the most challenging. The other thing I find the most challenging as well, I have to say, is in the first year, I probably spent, because everyone starts out starry-eyed, they're going to be successful, it's all going to go smoothly. Well, the reality is you spend 95% of your time doing the things that really you perceive not to add any value to the business, and 5% of the time doing the things that you thought would be 95% of your time and fun. So, you spend all your time setting up your systems, your payroll, your policies, debating with people around what their REM should be, how we should manage policies like parental leave and what social media presence we should have, what that should look like, how we should present to the market, what we should charge clients. You spend all of your time doing that stuff. They're the challenges, I think, of when you're doing any business, as well as the sleepless nights as to, have I made the right decision? Am I going to be able to pay someone? And I think to your point, Helen, it wasn't deliberate. We left and we started in every jurisdiction with really highly qualified group of people, and that means a large payroll. And I think I underestimated the stress that comes along with, if you're a good human, you actually worry about the things that you don't think you're going to worry about. Like, oh my goodness, if this doesn't succeed and I let these people down, they've got young kids and a mortgage. And they're the things that got to me the most and still get to me the most.
But I just want to pick up on something you said about people being people. As someone who finds that bit tough, how do you? Because to be honest, most people don't come on this leadership podcast and say, I find the people bit annoying. Most come on and say, I love people. I really like working with people. What I'm good at is people. So let's talk about people for a bit.
I think, look, I'm not the person to ask. Everyone who works, the people to ask. But I think what I try and do is, whenever there's a hard conversation, first of all, I actually don't. I say, let's talk about it. And I guess the approach that I've taken for some time now is I'll sit down and I'll say, this is my perspectives. And you might not like it, or, you might not agree with it, but I want you to understand why my perspective is this, the why I think this, and why the decision has been taken. Because often people, and you forget, because if you're the decision maker or you've started the business, you forget that they have information gaps in why you're doing certain things. So I think if you sit down and say, listen, I know you want twice your salary and I know that you want this, but just so you know, when we started the business, this is how we set it up. This is why we set it up that way. It's based on these principles or this foundation. And if I do something bespoke for you or unusual for you, then I have to tell the rest of the team. We have to justify that to everyone. So that's why this is my position. But you tell me what your position is so that I can understand it and then find where the middle ground is. And I actually find that even if you don't get agreement, there's at least then common understanding. I understand where they're coming from and they understand where I'm coming from. Ultimately, then, you can never blame somebody for making a choice that's in their own best interest, because at the end of the day, when you're running a business, you've got to make choices that are in the best interest of the greater number of people that are there, not the minorities, no matter how hard that feels, because otherwise you would be running 30 different policies at any one time. Like, there has to be some standardization as you grow. So I find that really difficult, but I've found it the better approach for me, who's not the best people manager, to actually just sit down and tell them why I'm doing something in a particular way.
So then what about not being a good people? What are you not good at? Because that is a very valid way of handling conflict and challenging conversations. What are you not good at?
Empathy. I don't like it. I find it really challenging. I'm not good at the empathies, and I'm too, like the team tells me, you're too abrupt, Nick. You just say it. And then we're all like still sort of catching up with why certain things are happening. And you're just like, you've already moved on. And I also explain that to people. I say, well, you're still thinking about it. I've said it and I've moved on. And it's not, I don't do it out of malice. I genuinely don't. And I say that to people. It's just that once I've made a decision and said it, go back to my stubbornness. I'm already down the track and they're still digesting things. So it's just a style thing. I definitely think it comes with age as well.
Do you think you're judged differently for those skills than a male boss would be judged?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
But I just think that's the world. Like, I sort of don't reflect much on that point because I just think that that's the world we live in. And no, you can't change that. It's just like, it's easier to say she's a bitch or a hard ass, and those terms wouldn't be applied to a male. And I long ago got over that.
I again, don't think I've ever had a guest come on this podcast and say, I'm crap at empathy. So this is another first for me, and fantastic. But I'm going to challenge you a bit more on it. 12 people walked out of your old consulting firm to follow you into a new consulting firm. So you're doing something right.
Maybe they've got a piece of their brain missing, huh? Or maybe they were up for an adventure. I don't know. Maybe you're better placed to ask them.
How good are you at receiving the feedback as the CEO? You've said you don't really like the discomfort of the interactions with the team, and people isn't great. Your people fit's not the favorite part of it. Your brain is more interested in the strategy and the strategic and the impact you're having on states and companies. But I'm interested in the reverse, when your team comes to you and says, Nick, you need to do things differently, or we don't think this is working, or we need to do something wildly different. How as a leader do you manage that kind of feedback?
I think like everything's personal and nothing's personal. But when it's first said to you, I just don't think whatever the context is, I think that it always hurts if someone says, look, you said this, it didn't go down wrong, or we don't think that we should do this. I think that you lose your touch if it doesn't get to you. And for all the bravado that you might put on, I do think it gets to you. So probably this, not dissimilar to everyone else. I get offended when I first hear it and I go away and stew on it, and then you dissect it element by element. And then the first thing I would say is, if you're ever running a business and you stop getting that feedback, then the business is probably going down the gurgler, or you got the wrong people, because you always need, and I'm always grateful for the person in the business that comes and says that, because I think you sort of forget this, but to someone you're still the boss, or, you're still in charge. And so I think that takes courage, and I think I'm always grateful. Even if I think, no matter what I think of the feedback, I'm always very grateful that someone had, put their hand up and said it. I generally, as I said, go through the entire emotional, bell curve and get upset, but then I stew on it and I will change my mind. Like, I will Or I'll say, okay, well, we can ask the rest of the team, or we can do these things, or, okay, if we're going to do that, here's the trade-off, or here's what I'm going to do differently. And so, in the first year of operation, I got some harsh feedback, and I basically broke it down into 3 categories. Here's the things that you said that are right and that I'm prepared to change. And if you see me falling back into old habits, then you can call me out. Here are the things that you said that are right, that, here's the context for them. So we might be able to change some, but some we won't. And here's the things that you said that are basically wrong, and this is why they're wrong. And I just think being always at least being able to indicate that no matter which one of those 3 sort of silos they fit into, that you've heard what's being said, that matters. It doesn't hurt less because, no one, but I just think you have to be able to break it down and respond.
But the reason I asked that question was you said at the outset you're really stubborn. So I was kind of wondering how that, if you're stubborn and you get feedback you don't like, how do you, that's pretty impressive that you somehow do move past the stubborn reaction rather than just remain stubborn.
Well, I think the reason is innately commercial. A business isn't a business without a team of people. So if you want to have everything your own way, then be a sole trader.
Yeah.
My job is to keep everybody happy because that makes the business hum. So there always is room for movement. And it's about my commitment to the business rather than commitment to one single idea or one single view. So, don't let it think it makes me any less stubborn. It's just my stubbornness is channeled in a direction.
All right. Well, let's. I kind of glossed over the sorts of things that you like thinking about and you like doing. So maybe we should talk a little bit about when you're not dealing with people and you are building a company, what are the sorts of issues and things that you're good at and you like doing?
Oh, like the most satisfying thing about building about a business, no matter what you're doing, I think, when a client says that you've made them happy and satisfied. There is nothing better. There is nothing better. The other thing that actually gives me a real buzz is when the team says that they're happy coming to work. There is nothing better. Because I think it says to you that there's something going right. Like on both sides of that coin, that makes me happy. They're the things that make me happy.
And what are you seeing at the moment in business? Are things feeling pretty tough for you at the moment?
Well, I just think it's a tough environment. And so, we're in infrastructure advisory. So delivery is tough, productivity is hard, the economic climate is getting tougher. We do a bit of work in with Summers on large assets and working out how they can generate more revenue, different ways of pricing and funding. The demand for that type of service is growing, which actually says the economy is getting tighter. It's the demand for hard infrastructure like transport, and in Sydney the metro, I say, has made public transport sexy again. So I think that all of a sudden people have looked at projects like the metro and said, it's amazing, everything from the stations to the actual rolling stock is amazing, we want one of those. So everyone wants a metro, but the reality is we're a small population and it's hard to deliver world-class infrastructure when you don't have as many people paying for it. I think that's the hard reality out there.
And how are you thinking about AI?
That's a good question. We're actually just starting to go through the process as a business and looking and testing some business cases insofar as how you can use AI. I've dabbled with it. I think it's great for things like, write me a document that says these things. Again, sometimes when you ask it a question and you've lived it, it spits you out an incorrect answer. So I guess what I'm worried about from an AI perspective is accuracy. That doesn't mean it won't get better. And that doesn't mean that things that don't rely on history as such, that it'll be absolutely amazing and life-changing. I do agree with. and hence why we're starting to look at, well, what can you use it for where it uses the tools. And I've got some amazingly brilliant people in the business that are working on use cases for it at the moment. I do think it's going to change our world. But I always say there's always the same amount of money out there in the world. It just changes hands. So I think it will change the types of jobs, not be a job wipeout like somebody thinks.
Well, that's good news. Thank you for that uplifting answer. And my final question for you today, and thank you. This has been amazing to talk to you about all these issues. But what's the best piece of feedback you've received in your career?
Anna once said to me, use your common sense. If you had to explain to your nana why you were going to do something, do you think she would understand your answer? And I think that's a really, really good piece of advice to live by and I think common sense is not all that common. The other thing that I would say is, and this is probably the hardest, is don't worry about being in the spotlight. Just do a really good job because you will get noticed. And there are some, again, going to some members of our team who are super, super brilliant individual economists and engineers, and they do amazing work and they always get noticed by the client. And I just think that that's amazing that that's sort of out there that happens. I think it was said to me once as it's what you do in the darkness that puts you in the spotlight. So just stay in the dark doing what you're doing. That's all that matters. But yeah, I live by that. If I'm explaining this to my nana, how would I explain it to her as common sense? I think that's a good piece of advice to live by.
Nicole Scurrah, thank you so much. Fantastic to talk to you. I did actually interview your old boss, Anna Bligh, a number of years ago, and it was one of my favourite interviews of all time, just as she was leaving, or actually dealing with the COVID crisis as head of the Australian Banking Association. But I can see why you two made such a formidable team, and thank you for all your support for FW, both by being here today, but also behind the scenes. And it's great to chat to you.
Great to chat to you. Thanks, Helen.
This week, Helen, we've had someone write in who has to fire someone for the first time. They said that they've ticked all the boxes in terms of documentation, they've coordinated with HR, but they're understandably dreading having this conversation. They want to know if you have any advice or tips about how to do it, and they've added on any tips in particular about how not to seem nervous when you're having the conversation.
This is just awful, and I don't think anyone really gets good at it because it is a dreadful feeling leading into it and it's a dreadful feeling afterwards. So I just want to acknowledge that. But okay, it has to be done, and the longer you spend time in leadership, the more likely it needs to be done. I'd also say if someone is not right in the job, you are doing your organisation and yourself and probably them a favour as well. So Adessa, I'm going to add one more thing before I answer this question. Adessa, I'm really bad at this. So if anyone wants to completely disregard my advice, I'd understand. I find these conversations really hard and I'm terrible at them. But I've done enough interviews to know what best practice looks like. Go in with a plan, know exactly what you want to say. If you're nervous, practice it. Talk to your partner or the domestic animal at your house and just get familiar with the language and familiar with hearing your voice. Use the words. Deliver the news early. Use words like, we're going to have a difficult conversation. Thank you for joining me. This is a difficult conversation. Usually the circumstances are pretty obvious to the person on the other side of the screen or the desk. Have someone present. That's a question mark for me. Sometimes HR can be very helpful. Sometimes it's absolutely necessary and non-negotiable depending on the process of your organisation. But it's not always necessary and it can exacerbate the situation depending on your relationship with the individual. For example, if it's an old school friend who's worked together with you in the business for a long time, it might, having an HR person there might not be the right thing to do. Be concise, and factual, be clear and direct, give the person some agency, ask them what they'd like to do next, ask them if there's anything they can do to help. Talk about referees and references, talk about the afternoon off or not, as the case might be, talk about the comms strategy so that there's some understanding what the next steps are immediately. Keep it short. There isn't a lot to be gained by going over what's happened or why or hearing explanations. Be compassionate insofar as you can. I do know circumstances where people have fired or moved people out of jobs when it's completely beyond their control and those relationships have remained intact. It is possible to do that, but I do lean on the need to be factual, compassionate, direct, and concise.
Most times have you found, Helen, that they usually know it's coming?
Yeah, mostly. In my experience, you very rarely are letting an overperformer leave. You are, in almost all circumstances, letting underperformers go. And that underperformance has been noted either in subtle or direct ways over time. These days, there are performance management processes. There are letters of ways to work. There are all sorts of methods to track it and which is necessary. So absolutely, the employee is usually aware. They're usually aware that they're unhappy in the job too. So that is often something to remember. They're not enjoying the work. They're not at their best. And they will be served by moving into a culture or a team where they are a better fit. I think as a leader, it is worth noting that not everyone is suited to your organisation or the team. And that does not mean that that person is not a valuable employee to another organisation or can't be a valuable employee to another organisation and thrive in a completely different circumstance. But I know that it is a very tough day for both the organisation, the team, the leader, and of course the person who you're letting go.
And in terms of next steps after the conversation, how would you approach breaking it to the broader team? Would you take the lead from the person you've just fired, or do you have a process?
I think there are small, medium, and large versions of this. If you're in a large organisation, these things are industrialised. Where if you are letting 200 people go on Friday, there's not a lot of room to move. There is a system and a process, and there's a box and a key and a laptop and a phone. All those things are done in a very clinical way. If you're a small team, then absolutely, it's such a culture issue when you let a member of a small team go. Your team will be sympathetic. Even if they think that person was underperforming and it was driving them a bit nuts, they will still be sympathetic, particularly in an all-female team. And in a medium-sized team, which is what we are, a bit of both. There's a bit of a system that's required, and there is an HR rule book, and you need to be compliant. But at the same time, there are no two employees that are the same. So tailoring how you speak to the individual is important. I often talk about running a team. It's a bit like running a football team. Every player is different, and speaking to that player as an individual is important. And I think in the case of what next, absolutely understand what the drivers are, whether they're going to feel ashamed or emotional or angry, and working to that and trying to mitigate is important. So it could mean letting them sit for a couple of days. It could mean seeing whether you've given them prior warning that the role will be terminated or the contract's coming to an end, so they've got an opportunity to go and find another job before the role's terminated. If it's a performance management situation, it might be more clinical. If something's gone, wrong, and you have no choice but to let them go, the situation might be more clinical and a little bit more, there might be more pain on both sides. But I do think having a frank discussion about what next before you leave the room or the discussion is very important, so you do know what the next steps are. I guess that's my experience as a leader. Can you, I know you've done the research, what's the actual best practice?
actual best practice that I found in a Harvard Business Review article was firstly, not to drag your feet. Don't delay firing someone, lead up front. Secondly, make HR your ally. Check your plans with HR before scheduling the conversation. Make sure everything's set to go. Keep it short. And then fourthly, and importantly, stay in the room. Be compassionate. Don't run away as soon as the conversation's had. Offer to be helpful. This could come in the form of offering to write a reference, giving them options, giving them choices, and then have a plan for how you will talk to your team afterwards and bring up their dismissal. Very good. Thank you.
This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation. It was produced by Odessa Blaine, Susan Warby, and led by Paddy Andrews.